most people in here know me, but if you don't, I'm Drake. I have been a full-time writer for over 20 years. I was the lead writer for a $600 million game from Sony. I've done musicals and stage plays and comics and video games, obviously. I'm an award-winning novelist, award-winning screenplay writer. I've written several things for Hollywood. I've done TV stuff. There's almost nothing, no medium that I haven't written in at this point in my career. So I've been doing a lot. I do have a few things I'll start with. Can I share? Yeah, it looks like I can share my screen.
Yes, you can.
So just to kind of start off with, if you do end up liking what I have to say, I do have a series of creative writing books. Dynamic story creation, I used to be really proud to say that it was required reading of several divisions of Disney. I don't think they've read it in the last 5, 10 years because, it's all about how to write good stories. But it used to be required reading inside of Disney. And it is more um abstract. It's all with what makes a story, what resonates with readers, what readers are looking for. It goes deep into theme. What is a theme? How to use a theme? How to find your theme? How do how the theme helps you write the story and all of that. Better writing through stronger narrative is everything that I think you need to know to be a solid prose writer. And then I'm pretty famous for being a very emotionally driven, very showy, very immersive writer. And my ultimate guide to show don't tell goes pretty deep into that. I do have a website where I have my classes, drakeu.com. There's not a ton on it right now. There is some, but I launched it right before I got cancer. And so I'm just now getting back to the point where I can really start getting things done. And I'm doing a lot of writing because I'm so far behind. I do have a podcast, Releasing Your Inner Dragon. We've got over 280 episodes now. It's me and another author every week. We talk about some aspect of writing for about an hour. It's available everywhere there's that podcast is available. It's also on YouTube. We do a live edit about once a month. So if you do go to YouTube or Spotify video now, we just got on a new platform that got us on a Spotify video. Um, you can actually watch, as we're going through and editing, but you can also listen to it. But really, the thing that I have that everybody should take advantage of is my writer's room. It's an online writing community. There's a free side to it. So every month I do a live critique group with the free side. I do a Q&A, monthly Q&A. I do all sorts of stuff. You can be a part of the book club. There's all sorts of different things. But the real magic is on the paid side. It's going to be $100 a month once we get everything going. But anybody who joins while we're kind of building it, it's $50 a month. But we're running anywhere from 5 to 6 critique groups every single week. I do development pods, I do classes, I do writing workshops. We have a place where you can post chapters for members to critique offline. And I mean, it's everything I wish I had as a writer 30 years ago. So if you want to check it out, you can. If you go to writersroom.us, you can join for 2 weeks for $1. Check it out. But again, there's a free side. So even if you just do the free side, I would highly recommend that you at least join that side because there's a ton of things that I do in the writer's room. I'm in there every single week. So that's my stuff. Let me get out of here. All right. So Joe wanted me to talk about bios in particular for giving it to the industry and synopses of your story that are going to the industry. The big mistake that people make out of these that I see, and it's the same thing with covers, and it's the same thing with back blurbs. Covers, back blurbs, your bio to the industry, synopsis of your story to the industry is not, you can't think of it like a storyteller. And that's one of the reasons why so many people that are writers have a hard time with this stuff. A cover is not a representation of your story. It's something that is eye-catching that people can walk by and go, "Oh, that looks cool. What is that?" Now it can't lie to the readers, but it's it's a it's eye candy. It's supposed to pull them in. Same thing with the back blurb. The back blurb is not, this is a story about John who grew up in a small town who did this and did this and did this. it's a marketing piece. It's a thing that is supposed to, when you end up reading it, you go, that sounds interesting. I want to find out. It really is supposed to ask a question and leave the reader with a question. And that's why so many writers, especially in the self-publishing world, fail so miserably on back blurbs and covers because they just put their story into it. It's the same thing with your bio and your synopsis. So I'll start with the bio. Most bios that I see are just, here's information about me. Agents aren't buying you. What they're buying is they're buying your ability to help sell and market books. So the big thing that you want to look at with your bio is you want to answer the question for the agent, who are you? Why should they care about you in relation to this book, and how is it going to help them sell it? So you obviously want to include, if you have, any writer credentials or anything like that, any publishing thing, credits that you've gotten, all of those are great. But so many people that are going to these, they don't have anything. They've never been published. They don't have, whatever. But there is still a ton that you can use the bio for. Um, One of the things to think about is that your writing authority comes from a bunch of different kind of places. So yes, we have our publishing credentials. I went through my little resume at the beginning of this, and that's great. But also, what are you doing in this writer's journey? Are you a part of a writer's group? How long have you been a part of a writer's group? How often do you attend? What are you doing to further yourself as a writer? Because what that does is it helps establish that you're taking this seriously, that you're wanting to do more than just puke words on the page and expect somebody to read them. So make sure that you do that. Another thing is the authority of your genre. So everybody in here has a genre that they write in. Uh, it was Suzanne, right? Suzanne, what do you write? Horror. Boom, right there. You need to put in enough information that the agent understands that you understand that genre. I've been a fan of this genre for this long. I know that fans of this genre are looking for this, this, and this. This is what we want to convey to that agent. We want to convey that we are an authority in what we're doing. We understand our genre. We understand what we have to do to learn to write, to pursue this as a professional career, so on and so forth. You do want to have any lived experiences that you have, anything that could relate to your writing experience or to your storytelling, especially the story that you're trying to pitch at that time. So, if you're writing war fiction and you're ex-military, if you're writing, a Stephen King small town story and you grew up in, whatever, Idaho, if you're doing something dealing with teaching and you have teaching credentials, anything like that, anything that you can relate real world experience to anything about your book. If it's related, try and include that in there. And the last thing you want to do is about you, who you are, where you live, because that's one of the least important things as far as the agent is concerned. They want to know how well you understand your job as a writer is the most important thing. The other thing that I would recommend, and don't go crazy with this because it can become gimmicky if you lean into it too much, but I have talked to a lot of agents that one of the things that stands out to them is when they read a bio and it kind of shows the voice of the author and that genre. So, if you are writing horror, maybe you write a very sharp kind of tone or something like that. If you're writing fantasy like I do, maybe it's an evocative kind of tone to it. Again, if you lean too much into it, you will turn them off. So it still needs to be, a letter. I'm not going to do a fantasy speak, all of that for what I was doing if I was doing a bio for one of them. The big thing is one of the things that happened to me early in my career. I befriended this agent and we became friends because he didn't represent anything that I did. And so he never had to tell me no. And we used to go out to dinner or whatever. And one of the things he said, and this is, I'd probably only been a professional writer for maybe 2 or 3 years at this point. And he said, "Oh yeah, I only need to read a paragraph of somebody's work, and I know everything about that person." And it, I remember it upset me because I was like, there's no way you can read a paragraph of someone's writing and know what type of writer they are. 20 years later, I only need to read a paragraph of somebody's writing and I know what type of writer they are. Because whatever mistakes you make, whatever sentence flow you have, that is what you have. And it's going to be consistent throughout the whole thing. That's one of the reasons why you want to make sure, especially on anything that you're presenting to um, the industry, you want to make sure that it is perfect. Um, I was with a publisher for a while that they had a wall of shame. It was personal to them. This is a terrible story because this was just for them inside, but they had query letters that were just cringeworthy, and they would put it up there. And my favorite one was the first line of it said, "I know I'm not a professional author yet." So first of all, don't start with a negative about yourself. But they had also spelled no, N-O. So the second word of their query letter was spelled wrong. You want to take the time to make sure that everything is as pristine as you can possibly make it. Because here's the thing, they get a lot of queries. And so anything that you can make it easy on them to reject it, misspelled words, confusing sentences, too long-winded, it gives them that opportunity to be able to say, yeah, I'm going to reject this and not feel bad about it because you've given them an excuse to reject it. So basically, when you're doing it for the bio, make sure it's brief but dense. Every single sentence matters. Every single word that you use in there matters. So you want to do 2 to 4, sentences per paragraph, maybe 4 paragraphs total for your bio. It needs to be who you are as a writer, your relevant credibility. So any publishing credits, in lack of that, anything that you're doing to further yourself as a writer, understanding your platform, let them know what genre that you're writing in. And then third, or the fourth thing last, is that humanizing element, that personal kind of touch to it. Anything that you've done in life, your lived experiences that help you relate to this thing that you're selling. But you got to remember it's a marketing piece. You're trying to sell yourself. So, I mean, that's really have a lot to say about the bio. I got a little bit more to say about the synopsis, but any questions about the bio itself? Laura?
So, how long would you suggest the bio should be?
Like I said, 2 to 4 sentences per paragraph, no more than those 4 paragraphs. You need it to be brief and dense. So the word choices that you choose are the most important. So if you write something and you go, wow, I can say these 3 words in one word that's just a stronger one word, or these 4 words, I can say it in this one word and it's a stronger word, that's what you want to do. You don't want to be long-winded. You don't want to, um, they don't have a lot of time. And so if you're just rambling, kind of like I'm doing in this, that's not what's going to sell you in on that bio. So short,
Uh,
as short as you can by giving them the relevant information.
And would you say that that bio would also work for like your like for your
For your book,
author page? Yeah, for your
no,
author page? No, then it's
no,
different. Okay.
no, not at all. Your your author bio page is to your fan. It's to your reader, and they want to know you on a personal level. I mean, my fans, it's one of the reasons why in my newsletter, there's always a personal section. Hey, this is what I'm doing right now. This is what I'm doing. Like I love raising spices. So I'm growing like 14 different types of peppers right now.
Wow.
By the way, if you want to know the secret to gardening in Las Vegas, air conditioning. So my living room is actually a greenhouse now. Because
Master gardener.
that's the only way to grow things in Vegas.
Yeah,
But they like that. So your bio page in the back of your book is not trying to sell the book. It's already been sold. Like
right.
they're all, and no one's going to read your author bio page unless they're interested in you as an individual. In other words, they've read your book and they're like, wow, this was really good. I want to know a little bit about the person who wrote this. So that's completely different. And you need to have a completely different mindset for writing that author bio page because that is a personal, hey, thank you for reading this. Let me let you get to know me a little bit now. Um, I think one of my favorites growing up was Piers Anthony. And in the back of almost every one of his novels, he wrote like a 15-page to 20-page letter of everything he did that year. And it was crazy stuff. It was all personal stuff, his daughters, when he built the house and moved to it and just all this stuff. And I read every single one of those because I was a huge Piers Anthony fan and I wanted to know about him. So those are very, very, very different. When you're submitting to industry, they don't want to know you as a person. They want to know why and how you're going to help them make money. Publishing is a business. It's not about art. It's not about characters. It's not about story. It's about money. And so that's where you need to kind of focus it on. It needs to be that here's why you don't want to not sign me. Like, this is what I'm going to be able to bring to the table. If you do have platforms, I guess I missed that. If you do have any platforms, like I have a fairly large podcast platform, I have, a fairly large newsletter subscription. Those are things that I would put in there. I've got about, and again, I've lost several years because of cancer. I had another health issue before that, but I got about 20,000 people or whatever that I have a reach of right now. So I would put that in my thing. These are active fans that I have access to right here because that's what they want to know. So it's just a different mindset. You have to understand that you're trying, it's just like a resume. If you were trying to get a job somewhere, you wouldn't write, oh, and my hobby is I really love, raising peppers in Las Vegas. And a potential employer, it doesn't want to know that, because they're going through all these applications and they want the applications going to stand out and make them go, oh, this is a person I want to hire. You're doing the same thing with your author bio when you're submitting that to industry. You're trying to get hired by them. That's a good way to kind of think about it. Does that help? Any other questions on bios? We good? All right. Let me break your heart on synopsises because this is another thing that you have to change your mindset on for how you're going to do the synopsis. Because again, this is not your back blurb. Agents don't want to be treated like a reader. You're not. If they want a synopsis of your story, they need to see every single aspect of it. They need to understand that you understand story structure, causality, flow, theme, That's what they want to see. So one of the hardest things that writers have with creating their synopsis for industry is spoil everything. This is not a, like I said, it's not a back blurb. It's not a, I'm going to give you this little portion to try to entice you to read this book. They're not going to read your book. They want to read the story to see if it has industry legs that are going to capture audiences, which means they want to know your twists. They want to know your ending. They want to know that you understand how to tell a story. That's the big thing that they want. And it's tough for a lot of writers because we always hate, I mean, so every Sunday, one of the things I do for the free side of the creator, for the free side of the writer's room is I run my personal writers group in the writers room. So, me and my people, there's five of us, six of us total. But five of us meet every Sunday. We're the same every time. It's my private critique group. It's called Drake's Not Very Private Critique Group because everybody can come and just sit and watch as we do our thing. And we got in a discussion this Sunday, and I literally just went, let me explain the story. And I spoiled the whole thing, every twist, everything, and it killed me. I hate doing that. But they were trying to give me feedback on something that if they didn't have all the spoilers, they couldn't help me with that. But I get it. It's hard to just spoil your entire story. But that is what you're doing. So the big thing is cause effects, cause effect escalation. They want to know that you understand pacing. They want to know that you understand tension. They want to know that you understand what makes a story compelling for readers for your genre. That's the other thing you have to be very specific on. I write romance under a female name. Romance is a very different genre than epic fantasy. So when you write this story out, it needs to be written in a way so that they can see, oh, this is how it's carrying the story through for the reader. This is why this story is going to be successful if I was to pick this up. This is what I'm going to tell the publisher to get them to want to buy this story. Um, Pick a genre. So many writers are like, well, so mine's a romance, epic fantasy, horror, sci-fi, murder mystery with a little bit of Western twist. No, it isn't. There's no category that fits into. And if you're selling it to the industry, it has to go on a shelf. So whatever one you think, now again, you can't lie, but if it is romance and sci-fi and horror, if I'm sitting down in front of a horror agent, I'm going to go, I'm writing a horror. If I'm sitting down in front of a romance, as long as I'm not lying, again, don't lie to them because you will burn yourself in this industry. It's a very small industry and everyone knows everyone. So if you lie to them, you seriously hurt your career. But if it is a romance, sci-fi with a little bit, and a horror, and it legitimately can go into those categories, then yeah, whichever agent I'm sitting on, whatever they represent, that's what I'm gonna be pitching. Now I'm gonna let them know, obviously, if there's horror elements, like if I'm sitting down a romance person, I'm gonna let them know it's a fantasy, with some horror elements, but it's a romance. You have to know your genre. They have to know your genre. Also, you want to focus on one spine when it comes to submitting to the industry. So, in other words, your main protagonist, they don't go into your secondary characters, your tertiary characters. Like it's too much. It muddies the water. Focus on that one story element that goes through your entire story. Your main conflict, there might be some other things that are there. It's like, oh, but this is also a cool piece to this. No. We're pitching to the industry to get them to buy something from us. So one through line of your story, stick to that as close as you possibly can. Now, if there is something that you're like, yeah, but if I don't give them this, it actually breaks the causality chain, then yeah, you have to give them that because you have to show them that you understand how to create the building blocks of your story. But stick to one protagonist. It's called one spine. Stick to one protagonist, one conflict, the main protagonist, the main conflict. What's the main thrust of the book? That's what you want to do. Subplots, they're just backstory, they're just background noise. They're going to muddy the water, and it gives you more chance of you messing up and accidentally confusing the reader in how you've explained your story. And that's a huge turnoff because they just go, well, you just don't know how to tell a story. Even if it's their fault because they misread it. Again, when you're trying to go into all these little subplots and everything like that, it just gives you more opportunities for them to make a mistake, for you to make a mistake. Doesn't matter who's to blame. If they're like, I don't like this, you're out. So doesn't matter if you messed up or they messed up. It is that way. Um, like I said, if it affects the main plot, if it affects the main conflict and you need it, include it. But if you don't. Keep it lean. Another thing that I think a lot of people mess up on is naming. When you get to the beginning, this is a book. My main character is Maxwell Alexander Drake. From there on out, protagonist, 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 protagonist. They don't need to be weighed down by your character names because your characters are roles. And so, sure, name the character once. From then on out, just call them protagonist, antagonist, whatever. The simpler you can keep this for them so that they're focusing on the actual story, the actual through line, the more success you're going to have with them reading it all the way to the end. Because they're not trying to remember anything. They're not trying to, pronounce your weird, especially for me. I mean, I write epic fantasy, so, I can get a little crazy sometimes with my names. I try not to, but it's what we do. So be very cautious with them and use role names more than anything else because that's what they care about. Um, Everything in books is about emotion. So when you're thinking about your through line, make sure you include the emotional through line. Where does the character start? Where do they end? How is the reader affected by this journey? Because what readers remember about stories is how it made them feel. No one goes, well, the book didn't make me feel anything, but I really loved how this character's backstory was. They remember how the book made them feel. And if you think back to some of your favorite things, you probably don't remember every little detail of the story. You remember that at the end of the story, you felt a certain way. And that really comes from the theme, but I'm not giving my theme class here. But that is something you want to try and work into this. Again, it all has to go straight through that, that one spine, but anything that you can add in it that shows your character's growth and how it's going to affect the reader through there, that's what you want. As much emotional clarity as you can possibly include. What does your character want? What are they afraid of? How do they change? Those are the important things because that shows that you understand story structure. You understand how to capture the reader's attention and hold it. I think that's all of my big things that I wanted to talk about. Spoil everything. Make sure you know your cause effects escalation, your tension, all of that. Um, Focus on one spine, so one protagonist, one conflict, one through line. Don't mess with your names. They don't care about your character names. Seriously, just use protagonist. Um, if you really want to use pronouns, that also works. But the problem is if you're talking about three characters or whatever, and you're doing he's or she's, it can get really confusing. So it's much better to do, your actual role names on them. And emotional clarity and emotional depth. Everything is about motivation. So work that in there. Any questions about those before I kind of line out like how you should put it together? All that made sense. So just like with the bio, and I should have said this with the bio is my recommendation. There's no set way to do a bio. There's no set way to do this. If it was, you could just go to a website and it says all agents require it this way. Just do it this way. That's why Joe had me come here. So just do know that this is just my opinions, what I've learned over the decades of doing this. So what I would recommend is in your paragraph one, use that as your setup, just like a 3-act play. So, who is your protagonist? What do they want? What is the world like? What is the inciting incident? What's the thing that breaks their world? So, if we were doing Finding Nemo, hopefully everybody's seen the movie Finding Nemo. It's what I use for a lot of my teaching because so many people have watched it. We would set up that, Marlin, and I'm just going to do the Marlin because I'm not even going to do the Nemo story because it is the smaller of the two stories. So if I was pitching this, my spine would be the Marlin story arc because it's 80% of the story or 70% of the story. So the story opens up with Marlin. He is a husband and a father, and he has provided his family with the best that he could possibly give them, the best house, best neighborhood, best school. And then a tragedy happens, and his wife and all but one of his children are killed. And he's left with just one child. And so now he has to learn to be that single father, but he also has to deal with the grief and the loss and the fact that he only has one child left. The inciting incident is that child gets kidnapped. So that's what we're doing. I do a little bit better job, and then I'm making this up on the fly. But, that's what I'd be thinking about if I was pitching Finding Nemo. We really want to try to do that in one paragraph. The next 2 to 3 paragraphs you want to be, or the next 2 paragraphs, 1 to 2 paragraphs, you want to do as your rising conflict. So what are the major obstacles? What is the escalation? How are the stakes increasing? The actual things that are getting in the way of your character from achieving their goal. And I don't know Finding Nemo enough to be able to walk you through that because, again, I'm just making this up on the fly. But there were sharks, and there was jellyfish, and there was a turtle who did a lot of weed. It seemed like whatever. I'm going to put some of that in there because I'm going to talk about this rising escalation that he has. And then for your last paragraph, and if you can keep this to 4 paragraphs as well, again, tight. If you hand them a 6-page synopsis, they're going to go, oh, I'll read this later. I don't have time right now. And that is the last time that they will take a look at that piece of paper. So you want something that, and I know that Henderson Writers Group pushes this because I used to be a member of Henderson Writers Group. So they go 1 page, front page, 1 page, synopsis, 1 page. So that's what we're talking about here. It needs to be tight, or they just don't have time or the energy or the desire to read, like my award-winning children's movie script, which has won awards in every contest it was put in. It has a 60-page synopsis. Movie scripts are about 20,000 words. So yeah, I did a lot of preloaded work when I created that fantasy world and everything that I did with that. If I handed that to somebody, they're not gonna enjoy that. So in the last paragraph, you want it to be your climax and your ending. What is the final confrontation? What is the resolution? And what does it all mean? In other words, your theme. What does the reader get out of this? What is the lesson learned? What is the emotional takeaway for the audience because they just went on this journey with your character? Again, you're not writing back copy. This is not a marketing tool to sell the book to a reader. This is a in-depth, all spoilers included, look at a piece of machinery to an industry professional so that they can go, yes, all the pieces are here. So let me see if you can now actually write, because that's the next thing. Because if you can't write, it can hurt the story. But if the story is there, they're going to want to get that next piece, which is where they'll say, well, send me the first three chapters or whatever. Because then they're testing your writing ability at that point. Don't be vague. Don't say stuff like, and then things go wrong. That doesn't do anything for them. Again, you're not selling here. You're showing your competence. Too many characters, another mistake. No clear stakes, no ending, not understanding what the reader walks away with. Those are all mistakes that I've seen a lot of in the past. So, first paragraph is your setup, protagonist world, inciting incident, inciting. Notice I keep saying inciting incident. What is it that breaks your character's world? That's vitally important. Paragraphs 2 and 3 is your rising conflict, your major obstacles, your escalation, the stakes. How are they increasing? What is sacrificed? In epic fantasy, there's always painful sacrifices that we make. And then paragraph 3 is your climax and your ending. What is that final confrontation? What is it? And then what is the resolution? And then what does it mean? What is the reader's emotional takeaway from this? If you can do that, you can show an industry professional that you understand story structure, that you understand what you're doing. And if this captures their attention, if they read that and go, I can see how readers are really going to, enjoy this story. That's when they're going to say, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and send me the first 5 chapters? I'm interested. Because again, you're applying for a job. It's just a lot of my teaching is about trying to show people that you have to change your mindset depending on what you're doing. Like the reason why most people can't write scripts and prose is because they're different languages. You have to think completely different. So when I write a movie script, I put on a completely different brain. I can't think about it like prose because it's not the same thing. Same thing when I switch over to this. It's the same thing here. If I'm selling something to the industry, I need to think one way. If I'm selling to a fan or a potential fan or potential reader, that is marketing. I got to think differently. And neither of these are the way you think about storytelling. So you have your storytelling brain, you have your marketing brain, and you have your industry brain. And they are very, very, very different. And you just need to focus on what is the end game. And when you understand that these are completely different end games, that will help you set up your mindset to be able to write something for that end game. And I think that's the biggest mistake that I see. Everyone just gets in that storyteller mode, which again, that's why Henderson Writers Group pushes the 1 page, because you get in that writers and like, let me tell you about my story. Oh, I'm so excited about my story. Like, no, it can you tell a story is what you're trying to show. And again, these are my opinions. So your mileage may vary, but I think that if you can adopt this mindset, I think you're going to be more successful than not when it comes to the industry. So in terms of genre, Suzanne asked, would the speculative fiction category not be specific enough? No, it would not, because speculative fiction is everything that isn't literary fiction. So it's sci-fi, romance, Western, fantasy, adventure fantasy, epic fantasy, romantasy, hard sci-fi, military sci-fi, war. Like speculative fiction is literally everything that is a genre. All genres fit into speculative fiction. So no, don't tell them that, because that will probably be their excuse of saying, thank you very much. I'll be in touch. Because again, when I'm doing my class on how to write a query letter, I always hate giving that class because, and again, I know a lot of agents, you have to understand you are giving this to somebody who hates your guts, who does not want to talk to you, who thinks you're a terrible writer, who thinks you're a terrible storyteller. And your job is to prove them wrong. But that's how I teach writing my first page. I write my first page to a reader who knows that I'm a terrible storyteller, and I'm going to prove them wrong. Most people fail on their first pages because they write their first page for themselves and they know everything about the story, and the reader doesn't. And that's where you fail. It's the same thing here. Query letters, and the average agent will read 50 to 100 query letters a day. They hate query letters. They hate reading them. They hate everyone who sends them to them. They hate them. So you have to write this stuff knowing that you're sending it to a hostile environment. It's the same thing here. So I'm not lying when I say if you give them excuse to put you down, they will every time. Like if you write on your query letter, dear sir or madam, they will reject it right there because they know you didn't do any research on them. And there are so many genres and they only represent a couple. The chances of you sending something that is not even in their genre is pretty high. And so they're just going to reject you. They're not going to waste your time. Dear sir, okay, I'm rejected. I don't care. It's gone. This person knows nothing about me. So therefore, they're probably, I represent this and they're going to send me that. I'm not going to waste my time reading this. Every excuse that you can give them to reject you, they will do it because they don't have time. They've got to get through a bunch of them. And so it's a buyer's market out there. I can't remember who it was, Reader's Digest or Publishers Weekly or one of them. Just last year, they did a thing. They estimate that 92% of all adults in America have a desire to write a novel.
Wow.
It's a buyer's market for them. And I'm not trying to be negative. It's just that if you really come to it with an attitude of you're trying to convince them that you are the right choice, that's putting your best foot forward. That's putting yourself in a position to give yourself the best opportunity to break into the industry. Any other questions? Anything? I'll talk about whatever. I mean, I will say this. As of Cancer, I've left the industry and I have no interest in the publishing industry. So my entire career is going the other direction. However, I have a platform. I have a fan base. I'm invited to the biggest conventions in the world. I have a marketing presence. I mean, I'm doing this next book that I'm doing it on one of the fundraiser sites like Kickstarter, but it's called Backer Kid. It's more geek oriented. And when they saw that I was doing it, they reached out to me and they were like, hey, we don't do this for very many people, but we would like to market you. So like the company is actually marketing me. Because I do have a good reputation in the industry. So it is hard to go the self-publishing route because of marketing. That's the only thing it is. Like one of the things that I hate is how catty writers can be. This is not a pie. Just because somebody buys your book doesn't mean they can't buy my book. Or, just because they buy your book doesn't mean they can't buy my book. Matter of fact, if you sell an epic fantasy book to somebody, if you sell 10,000 copies, the chances of you selling to somebody who's never read epic fantasy is pretty high. And if you turn one of them into an epic fantasy fan, then now they have a chance to buy my book because now they're an epic fantasy fan. So we're not competing against each other at all. It kills me that writers are so catty with each other. However, you are competing against the noise. Before AI, there was 1 million books being published every year. Last year, it topped 3 million because of all the AI garbage that is just being flooded onto the market. That is a lot of noise that you have to cut through. So marketing is the hardest thing that there is. And that's where the industry at least has, I don't think they actually own anything anymore. But that is where they have an advantage because they're in Barnes and Nobles, and so on and so forth. But again, Barnes and Noble sponsored me and I had books on end caps in Barnes and Noble. So I still have contacts in Barnes and Nobles. I still have that reputation. I don't know if I'm going to pursue it because I'd have to pay to print up, a lot of copies of books that they may send back if they wanted to. So I don't know if I'm going to go that route, but that's the difference. Self-publishing is great. The industry doesn't own anything anymore like it did 20 years ago when I got into this industry. So you can do everything yourself. You just have to understand the hardest thing is marketing. And if you don't have marketing, you don't have sales. I mean, it's just that simple.
Mm.
But get into the publishing industry. I mean, it's really nice when I say, yeah, there was a 600, million dollar, it was a multi-billion dollar company that said I was the best writer that existed. I'm currently the official writer for the oldest fantasy role-playing setting in the industry. It's called Harn World. Been in the business for 43, 44 years. Um, those things look great on the resume. Plus, it gives me access to their fan base instantly because they're saying, hey, you're my fan base. We just picked up this guy. We love him. You should check him out. Doing things like that are how you continue to propagate out into the different markets that are out there. But one of those is being traditionally published. That is a great way to have someone else propagate you out into those markets. So nothing wrong with them at all.
Bryn has her hand up. Go ahead, Bryn.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just wondering, what is the order of reading? Like if you send chapters, some of them want synopses, some of them don't. Chapters, query letter. Will they read the query letter or at least skim it before they read your sample chapters?
This is the most important thing that I can tell you about that. Read their website and do what they say. If they say just send us a query letter, just send them a query letter. If they say they want that query letter with an 1.5-inch border and they want it double spaced and they want it with this font, then do it. Whatever they ask for, and they will list out in their submission guidelines how to do it. Whatever they say, do that.
Yeah.
So they're not going to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
So they're not going to say send me a packet. They're not going to say send me a query letter with a synopsis and the first 5. Like, there's no one out there that I know of that does that. So they're either going to say send me a query letter, and the bigger ones are going to do.
So let me interrupt so that people who pitch to the agents and publishers at the conference,
okay,
they will ask for a query letter with 3 chapters, 30 pages, something like that.
And there's a reason for that. I don't want to be Debbie Downer. Almost every single person that goes to this convention will have the agents tell you to send them chapters. And the reason for that is they're sitting across from you as a human being. And it's really hard to sit across from a human being who has this dream and then go, that sounds like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why don't you leave? So they're always going to ask for that. And I try to tell people not to get too excited when they ask for it. Now, I will still remember the very first agent I ever pitched to was actually at the Henderson Writers Group, and it was Brendy Bowles. And I was super nervous, and I sat down, and I can talk very, very fast when I'm nervous. And I just started hammering. We had 10 minutes, and I had my 10-minute speech, and I just started laying into it. And she tried to interrupt me. And so I just spoke faster because I knew she was going to say no or whatever. And so she just sat back and she let me finish. And I think I finished it in about 90 seconds for my 10-minute speech. And she was like, you done? I'm like, yeah. She's like, okay. I know it says in the Henderson Writers Group little pamphlet, the convention pamphlet, that I am looking for fantasy. I don't represent fantasy. That's what I was trying to tell you at the beginning of this. I was like, oh. And she's like, but since we still have most of your time, would you like me to critique your pitch? And so she sat there and kind of helped me with that. But she didn't represent what I do. They can only sell to it is a who you know industry. So they have to know the acquisition editors that they can meet with for lunch, that they can actually, email directly and say, hey, I got this thing that fits this category that you're looking for. Can I send it over to you? If they don't have contacts in the genres that you're trying to do, they can't sell you. You know, that's why they specialize for the most part. The bigger ones, they're always going to specialize. So I will always remember sitting down with Brendy because it was funny. And she did say, "No, I don't want you to send me anything," because she didn't she didn't represent me. But that was your guys' fault because in it says she was looking for fantasy.
Hmm.
And they were not. I know you weren't even a part of that back then, Audrey, because I think it was before your time. But yeah, so
Wow.
you
But what if they do represent your genre?
then whatever
And
they
they,
tell you. If they say, yeah, send me your query letter with 3 chapters, then send it. I would go to their website and see if they have submission guidelines and follow it. If they like a certain type of font, if they want a certain type of margin, if they want whatever, follow it. It doesn't take anything to do that little setup in Word. And the more you do what you're doing when you do that, and like I said, I know a lot of agents and I understand why they do it. Because I've asked them that, like, why do you do this weird thing on your submission guidelines? And they go, oh, I want to see how easy the person is to follow directions.
Hmm.
I don't need it that way. I don't care. But if they do it, that's at least one little clue that this is a person who actually will follow directions. And that means that they're easier to work with because it's a buyer's market. You know, who's that one? Was it Hemingway that was famously an asshole? There's one big major author from back then that was really notoriously hard to work with. He wouldn't get published today because they have too many choices now. And they didn't have so many choices back then. Like, I can't remember who said it. I don't remember who said it, but they said, if you want to be successful in this industry, it might have been King. If you want to be successful in this industry, you need to do 2 of 3 things: be a really good writer, be easy to work with, and get your stuff in on time.
Hmm.
Which means you can be a crappy writer, but be really easy to work with and get your stuff in on time, and you'll be successful. I'm a really good writer, and I'm really easy to work with. I tend to be late a lot. But again, they keep hiring me even though I'm late because I'm easy to work with and I'm a good writer. If you can do all 3, great. I just can't. I'm notoriously late. I'm like 6 months behind on this latest Harnworld story. But I finally got it done. That was my brag. When you were saying, "Hey, brags," I was like, I finished a story last week that I was 6 months behind on and turned it in. Yeah,
Can I clarify my question because I probably
yes,
asked it wrong?
that's fine.
I mean, I think that's all good information for everybody anyway, but yeah, I'm a stickler. I spend probably an hour, 2 hours overhead anytime I send. I'm not currently sending queries. I have an agent for now. That's a whole other thing. But anyway, so if I'm back in the trenches at some point, I'm just curious. So I always follow the instructions, and I don't know, maybe it's different with literary fiction, but I find the standard is query letter plus sample pages. And they specifically say they want the sample pages in the body of the email. Mm-hmm. Which is always tricky because the formatting gets totally mucked up, but I do it. And, to the letter, I do that part of it. But my question was, do they read the query or at least skim it to get a sense of whether or not they're interested before they read the pages, or would they read the page first, or you just don't know?
Every agent is going to have their own quirk on how they do stuff. Okay. The only thing that I have found that's consistent with all the agents that I've met over my career is they are actively looking to reject them. They're just actively looking for anything that they can go, yeah, I'm going to reject this one so I can get through this. I've got to get through this pile today. So misspelled words, clunky sentences, no personalization, not following their submission guidelines, literally anything they can do to send you that form rejection letter. That's been the consistent thing. And I know that's a terrible thing to learn because
I agree. I think that's very true. But my approach after a few years and growing cynicism was that the motivation that helped me was I am going to make it harder for them to reject me. So that was my goal. Make it harder for them to say no, because no is the default.
It's literally how I teach my writers to write their first page of their novel. You need to be writing that first page to a reader who hates you and knows you're a crappy storyteller. Like, that is the attitude you need, both for submitting to the industry. You just have to use a different mindset on how you're going to write this stuff to present to them. It's the same mindset for the audience. I mean, so Harn World has been, like I said, they've been around for 44 years. They've never let anyone write in their world. They've never had somebody do tie-in writing, is what it's called. And then the owner read me a couple years ago and reached out to me. I was like, oh my God, could you write for us? And I've got one review from my first story from them that I saved because I love it. And it was this guy that was like, I am so pissed that they let someone write in my world, because he's a fan. So it's his world. And he's like, there's just been a deluge of garbage fantasy over these last 10 years. And when they announced that they were doing this, it just infuriated me. And I teach an MFA course at, a college. And so I bought this book for the sole intent to rip this writer apart. And I started reading it, and then I forgot to critique it. And it was just really good. And I got to the end and I was like, I forgot to critique it. So that's literally a reader who came at me from the beginning to rip me apart, because I was writing in his world, this really old fantasy setting that no one's been allowed to, desecrate. And yet, I still was able to turn him into a fan because I always write for a hostile reader. And it's the same thing here. You're trying to do the same thing here. And again, I'm not trying to be soul crushing here. I'm not trying to be, negative or anything like that. I'm trying to put my best foot forward. So if I've got a brand new reader, I'm writing for them. I'm going to prove to them that they're not going to put this book down. That's why when you read my reviews, you get stuff like, don't read Drake if you need sleep, because you're going to keep reading. I don't care if you need to go to sleep. You're going to read the next chapter. Because I'm trying to do my job. Same thing when you're doing this bio and the synopsis, query letters, the same thing. If you understand your audience and you understand their motivation, that they're like query letters, they're just trying to reject them as fast as possible. Because let me explain that. Everyone thinks that an agent's job is to look at query letters to pick up new clients. That's not their job. That's a byproduct of their job. Their job is to sell their current client list. That's their job. That's how they make money. They have a client list. They have books that all of those clients have given them. They are trying to sell those. When they're looking at query letters, they're not doing their job. They're not doing the part that they make money on. Yes, they have to pick up new clients. Yes, they have to find new books. Yes, they have to do all this stuff. That's a byproduct, though. Their mindset is, I need to spend time finding purchasers for these books, because that's how they make their money. So when you understand your target market, you have and you write for that, you have a much higher success rate of achieving what you're trying to achieve. And I think my attitude on this is probably why Joe asked me to do this. Because I don't usually pull punches. Because I just think attitude is everything. And if you understand, and you have the right mindset, you have a much higher chance of succeeding at it. If you go in just thinking it's all unicorn farts and rainbows, you're probably going to fail. And those are the people that are like, but my story is so awesome. Let me just tell you about my story, because my story is just everything. And they just ramble on about their story, and they don't actually ever get anywhere. And the agents don't have time for that.
Well, I was in a conversation with another writer recently who said something about, I just want an agent who loves my work. And I said, it's irrelevant if you're late, if the agent loves your work. What's relevant is if they think the editor and publisher and readers will love your work, right? People think, and I was the same, that's the end all, right? The agent is the end all. No, you are showing your agent how you were going to make their job easier, because they have to do what you do. They have to sell you. So
You're just
it was
giving
just
this.
kind of a itening realization I had.
I mean, you're just giving this class for me is all you're doing.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Like,
no,
no, no.
no, that's a
I'm
that's a
still
good
learning
thing.
that, but yeah, I
Um,
just like this conversation.
well, because that is the reality is, and even like a publisher doesn't care about the story. No one in the industry cares about stories. They care about selling units. So they need to know that the thing is going to have something that's going to sell units. And it could be anything that's gimmicky. I mean, that's the dumb thing. It could just be some weird thing about, you know, you were born a triplet, a conjoined twin is a triplet. And like, bam, we're going to market that. Like, I don't care if he can write or not. Like that right there will get me media time. Another thing you got to understand is, and I usually don't say this because this is also heartbreaking, but so it takes 2 years to publish a book in the industry. From the time you hand it in to the time it hits the market is 2 years. I mean, like Publishers Weekly won't even review a book if it's going to be published in less than 6 months from now. So it has to be over 6 months out for them to even review it. There's just a lot that has to happen in that book. But they have to publish X number of books every month, whatever size the publisher is. If it's 10 books a month, 100 books a month, whatever the size of the publisher is, which means they have to have a 2-year pipeline that is full. They've got 10 books this month, 10 books next month, 10 books next month, 10 books next month, or whatever. They also include their growth rate and everything else like that. So what they're actually buying for is for 25 months from now. That's the book that they're buying. That's what they're looking for. And they think they can predict the future. So like I love like in the 80s, in the late 80s, the publishing industry was like, vampires is done. Never sell another vampire book. There's really no reason to even think about it. And then Anne Rice's vampire series hit the market. And it was like, oh, right. People don't usually go off a trend. Like these trends that the publishing industry thinks there isn't. But it doesn't matter. They're buying on a trend. They think that they're right. So they're going to buy it on that. So what's really happening when you're submitting to agents, they've talked to their acquisitions editors, and their acquisitions editor said, I am looking for these types of stories. And so when they're looking at query letters, they're not even really looking whether you're a good writer or not. They're looking, do you fit the mold of something that the industry is looking for right now? If that box gets checked, then they'll go down these other paths. But honestly, if they've been told that zombie romances are all we're buying right now, then they're going to go through their query letter stack looking for zombie romances. And that's what they're going to do because they know that they've got a buyer for it. If you own a business and your clientele is like, you know what, we're only going to buy apples this week. That's all we want to buy. Well, then you're going to go get apples and sell them apples. It just makes sense. So there's another layer, but the reason why I don't talk about that normally is you have no control over that. And you'll never know what that is. You don't know what they're buying. You have no idea. So write what you write because the publishing industry is stupid. They've always been stupid. They're just dumb little lemmings and they think they know what they're doing with their little trends and stuff like that. So whatever you write will come back around. They will eventually think that what you're writing is the trend that they're looking for. Because they're just lemmings. They have no idea of what anything actually is. And they're even more dumb now, which is why I've left the industry. But that's my own jadedness against the industry. It's still get traditionally published if you can, because it will help it's one more market or one more vehicle that's going to sell your books for you, which is what you're looking for. That's why I took the job with Sony. That's why I'm working for Harm World. That's why I've written for Shadowrun. That's why I do some of the movie projects that I do, blah, blah, blah. All these little side projects that I do are always because I get access to their fan base instantly. So it's the same thing getting traditionally published. Just know it's hard. There's a lot going against you. Also, if you are going to go, this is a freebie. If you are going to try to be traditionally published, finish your book and know that no one's going to read it for the next 3 to 4 years. Just sit it. Just don't even think about it, because it's going to take you a long time to get an agent, and it's going to take them time to, and if you even, like, I had one of my fans reach out to me just like within the last couple of weeks, and they were like, I want to submit this in industry, but I've got the first couple of chapters up on whatever, one of the websites, BookBub, or I don't know, I think it was Wattpad. I think is what it was. He's like, I got up on Wattpad. Is that going to hurt me? I'm like, oh, that's going to kill you. Like, take that down. Don't ever let the industry know that you've released any bits of your book. So if you're going to try to break into the industry, write a book and then sit on it, and then write your next book. And, if you're going to do something else with that, do something else with that. But if you have a book that you're going to try to take the industry, preserve it for the industry and know that it's going to take years. I mean, Stephen King got rejected so many times that he said that the nail that he had on his wall that he was hanging rejection letters on came out of the wall, and the weight of the rejection letters ripped the nail out of the wall. So that's Stephen King.
Oh.
It just takes time. So anything else?
Now I'm wondering how big that nail was, or how small that nail was.
Well, my understanding is, and I haven't verified this, so I could be wrong on this. I might have just heard this somewhere or just dreamed it or whatever, but I have read like On Writing or whatever, so it might have been in there. But my understanding is that he actually quit. He stopped. He got so many rejection letters that he just said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And his wife went and got a PO box and kept submitting behind his back. And she's the one who sold Cujo. Again, I don't remember where I heard that from. I could be completely wrong. I could have made it up. I do make up stuff for a living. So maybe it's a story that I just made up, but I feel like I've heard that somewhere, that she is actually the one who sold Cujo.
I think he threw Carrie in the wastebasket, and I think she took Carrie out of the wastebasket.
Oh, maybe it
and
was Carrie.
submitted it.
Yeah, maybe it was Carrie.
I think Cujo, I think, was much later, but I think Carrie
Yeah,
was
so-
his first.
Yes,
It might have
it was
been Carrie. Yeah, so it might have been Carrie. Because he was just so frustrated with all the rejection letters that he was just like, I'm obviously no good at this. I quit. I'm no Nostradamus, but I do have one future telling. 100% of all writers who quit writing never become successful writers. That's a guarantee.
Well, we just need to marry Stephen King's wife.
I mean,
I like a challenge.
That story came from an interview his wife gave.
okay.
That's where that came from, and it was Carrie.
Well, Piers Anthony was one of my mentors, and one of the things he said all the time was, if you're going to be a professional writer, have a working spouse that loves you. Because it takes a long time to develop that career to the point where you're actually making a living off of it. So my wife quit work last year. So now there's just me. Anything else? If you guys haven't checked me out, Starving Writer Studio is my website. So like my creative writing books are there. If you want to actually read a piece, I've got the first 60,000 words of my novel up on the website that you can download for free. This novel that's coming out in July. If you just want to see if I'm worth my weight in salt as a writer. So, and then the writer's room, writersroom.us. If you want to work with me on a weekly basis, that's the place to do it. That's all I got.